Sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's story, which is Notebook Found in a Deserted House. First off, I want to write that I never did anything wrong. Not to nobody. They got no call to shut me up here, whoever they are. They got no reason to do what I'm afraid they're gonna do either. I think they're coming pretty soon. They've been outside a long time, digging, I guess, in that old well, looking for a gate. I heard. Not a regular gate, of course, but something else. I got a notion what they mean. I'm scared. I'd look out of the windows, but of course they're boarded up, so I can't see. But I turned on the lamp and I found this here notebook, so I want to put it all down. Then if I get a chance, maybe I can send it to somebody who can help me. Maybe somebody will find it. Anyways, it's better to write it out as best I can instead of just sitting here and waiting for them to come and get me. I guess I better start by telling my name, which is Willie Osborne, and I am 12 years old last July. I don't know where I was born. First thing I can remember is living out Rootsford, where, out in what folks call the back hill country. Yeah, it's real lonesome out there. Deep woods all around, lots of mountains and hills nobody never climbs. My grandma used to tell me about it when I was just a little shaver. That's who I lived with. Just grandma on account of my real folks being dead and all. Grandma was the one that taught me how to read and write. I'd never been to regular school. Grandma knew all kinds of things about the hills and the woods, and she told me some mighty queer stories. That's what I thought there was anyway. When I was little and living all alone with her, just stories, like the ones in them books, like stories about them ones hiding in the swamps. That was here before the settlers and the Indians both, and how there were circles in the swamps and big stones called altars, and where them ones used to make sacrifices to what they worshipped. Your grandma got some of the stories from her grandma, she said, about how them ones hid in the woods and swamps because they couldn't stand sunshine, and how the Indians kept out of their way. She said sometimes the Indians would leave some of their young people tied to the trees in the forest as a sacrifice, so to keep them ones contented and peaceful. The Indians knew all about them, and they tried to keep the white folks from noticing too much or settling too close to hills. Them ones didn't cause much trouble, but they might if they was crowded. So the Indians give excuses not for settling, saying there wasn't enough hunting and no trails, and it was too far off from the coast. Grandma told me that that was why not many places were settled even today out here. Nothing but a few farmhouses here and there. She told me them ones still alive. Sometimes on certain nights in the spring and fall, you could see lights and hear noises far off on the tops of the hills. Grandma said I had an Aunt Lucy and Uncle Fred who lived out there right smack in the middle of them hills. She said Pa used to visit them before he got married, and once he heard them beating on a tree drum one night along about Halloween time. That was before he met Ma and they got married, and she died when I come and he went away. Oh, yeah. I heard all kinds of stories, stories about witches and devils and Batmen that sucked your blood and haunts. And I heard about Salem and Arkham because I never been to a city, and I wanted to hear tell how they were. About a place called Innsmouth, the old rotten houses where people hid awful things away in the cellars and the attics. Your grandma, she told me about the way graves was dug deep under Arkham. She made it sound like the whole country was full of haunts, She used to scare me, telling about how some of these things looked and all, but she never would tell me how them ones looked, no matter how much I asked. She said she didn't want me to have any truck with such things. Bad enough she and her kin knew as much as they did. Almost too much for decent God-fearing folk, huh? It was lucky for me I didn't have to bother with such ideas. like my own ancestor on my father's side. ℍ𝕆𝕌𝕕 Osborne. Yeah, ℍ𝕆𝕌𝕕 Osborne, who got hanged for a witch back in the Salem days. So they was just stories to me, just stories. Until last year when Grandma died and Judge Krubenthorpe put me on the train and I went out to live with Aunt Lucy and Uncle Fred in the very same hills that Grandma used to tell about so often. And you can bet I was pretty excited. And the conductor let me ride with him all the way. He told me about the towns and everything. Uncle Fred, he met me at the station. He's a tall, thin man with a long beard. We drove off in a buggy from the little depot. No houses around there, nothing. Right there, right out into the woods. Yeah. Funny thing about them woods, they were so still and quiet. And they gave me the creeps. It was so dark and lonesome. Seemed like nobody ever had ever shouted or laughed or even smiled out there. I couldn't imagine anyone saying anything there except in whispers. Trees and all. So old, too. No animals around, nothing. No birds. The path got overgrown like nobody used it much ever. Uncle Fred drove along right fast, but he didn't hardly talk to me at all, but just made that old horse hump it. Pretty soon we struck into some hills. There was awfully high ones. There was woods on them, too. Sometimes a brook come running down, but I didn't see no house. It was always dark like at twilight wherever you looked. Lastly, we got up to the farmhouse there, a little place, old frame house and barn, a clear space and trees all kind of gloomy-like. And Aunt Lucy come out to meet us. She was a nice sort of little middle-aged lady who hugged me and took my stuffing back. But all this don't hold what I'm supposed to write down here, does it? It don't matter that all this last year I was living in a house here with them, eating off the stuff Uncle Fred farmed without ever going into town. No other farms around here for almost 4 miles, no school. So evenings Aunt Lucy'd help me with my reading. I never played much out there. At first I was scared of going into the woods on account of what Grandma had told me. Besides, I could tell as Aunt Lucy and Uncle Fred was scared of something from the way they locked the doors at night and never went into the woods after dark, even in the summer times. After a while, I got used to the idea of living in the woods, and they didn't seem so scary. I did chores for Uncle Fred, of course. Sometimes in the afternoons when he was busy, I'd just go off by myself, particularly by the time it was fall. And that's how I heard of one of the things. It was early October. I was in the glen right by the big boulder. You know the one. Well, I guess you do know the one. And there's this big boulder, and then the noise started, and I got behind that rock fast. You see, like I say, there isn't any animals in the woods, nor people, except perhaps old Cap Pritchard, the mailman who only comes through on Thursday afternoons. I think there was a library girl, too, rode a horse and dropped off books once in a great while, but I never hardly saw her. Anyway, when I heard a sound that wasn't Uncle Fred or Aunt Lucy calling to me, I knew I better hide. About that sound. Yeah, it was far away at first, a kind of dropping noise. Sounded like blood falling in little spurts on the bottom of the bucket when Uncle Fred hung up a butchered hog. I looked around. I couldn't make out nothing except Kim and all the rest of you. But anyway, I couldn't figure out the direction the noise was coming from neither. The noise sort of stopped for a minute, and there was only twilight and trees, still as death. Then the noise started again, nearer, louder. Sounded like a lot of people running or walking all at once, moving this way, twigs busting under feet and scrabbling in the bushes, all mixed up with the noise. I scrunched down behind that big old boulder, you know the one. I kept real quiet. I can tell that whatever makes the noise, it's real close now, right in the glen with me. I want to look up, but I doesn't because the sound is so loud and mean. And also there's an awful smell like something that was dead and buried being uncovered again in the sun. All at once the noise stops, and I can tell that whatever makes it is real close by. For a minute the woods are creepy still. And then comes the sound. It's a voice, and it's not a voice. That is, it doesn't sound like like a voice, but more like a buzzing or a croaking, deep and droning. But it has to be a voice because it's saying words. Not words I can understand, but words. Words that made me keep my head down, half afraid I might be seen, half afraid I might see something. I stayed there sweating and shaking. The smell was making me pretty sick. But that awful deep droning voice was worse. Saying over and over something like ℍ𝕆𝕌𝕉𝔼𝕆𝕆𝕂 or something like that. I don't know, Shogol something. I can't hope to spell it out the way it sounded, but I heard it enough times to remember. I was still listening when the smell got awful thick there. And I guess I must have fainted because when I woke up, the voice was gone. It was getting quite dark. I ran all the way home that night. Not before I saw where the thing had stood when it talked. And it was a thing. Yeah, no human being can leave tracks in the mud like that. Goat's hoofs all green with slime that smelled awful. Not 4 or 8, but a couple of 100. I didn't tell Aunt Lucy, Uncle Fred. That night when I went to bed, I had the terriblest dreams. I thought I was back in that glen, only this time I could see the thing. It was real tall and inky black, without any particular shape, except a lot of black ropes with ends like hooves on it. I mean, it had a shape but it kept changing, all bulgy and squirming into different sizes. There was a lot of mouths all over that thing, like puckered up leaves on branches. That's close as I can come. I reckon some of you thinking you'd like to been there and seen it. And I tell you, I was scared. The mouths was like leaves, and the whole thing was like a tree in the wind. A black tree with lots of branches trailing the ground, a whole lot of roofs ending in hoofs. And that green slime dribbling out of the mouths and down the legs was like sap. Next day, I remember to look in a book Aunt Lucy had downstairs. It was called mythology. This book told about some people who lived over in England and France in the old days and was called Druids. They worshipped trees. They thought they was alive. Yeah, well, maybe this thing was like what they worshipped, called a nature spirit. But these Druids, they lived across the ocean, so how could that be? I did a lot of thinking about it the next couple of days, and you can bet I didn't go out and play in those woods again. Last I figured out something like this. Maybe those Druids got chased out of the forest over there in England and France, and some of them was smart enough to build them some boats and come across the ocean like old Leif Erikson is supposed to have, huh? Then they could have maybe settled in the woods back here and frightened away the Indians with their magic spells and all. They know how to hide themselves away in the swamps, wouldn't they? And go right on with their heathen worshiping and calling up these spirits out of the ground or wherever they had come from. The Indians used to believe that the white gods coming from out of the sea a long time ago. What if that was just another way of telling how the Druids got here? Some real civilized Indians down Mexico or South America, Aztecs or Incas, I guess. They said a white god come over in a boat and taught them all kinds of magic. Couldn't he have been a Druid, you think? I do. That'd explain Grandma's stories about them ones too, wouldn't it? Those Druids hiding in the swamps would be the ones that did all the drumming and the pounding and lit the fires on the hills, and they'd be calling up them ones, the tree spirits or whatever, out of the earth. They'd make sacrifices. And them Druids always made sacrifices with blood, just like the old witches. And didn't Grandma tell about people who lived too near the hills disappearing and never being found no more again? Yeah, well, we lived in a spot just exactly like that. And it was getting close to Halloween. It was like, I don't know, the 27th, 26th, 27th October. It was the end of October, getting close to Halloween anyway. And that was the big time, Grandma always said. I began to wonder, how soon now? How soon? I got so scared I didn't go out of the house. Aunt Lucy made me a tonic and said I looked peaked. Yeah, I guess I did. All I know was one afternoon when I heard a buggy coming through the woods, I ran and I hid under my bed. It was only Cap Pritchard with the mail. Uncle Fred got it and come in all excited with a letter. Cousin Osborne was coming to stay with us. Cousin Osborne was kin to Aunt Lucy, and he had a vacation. He wanted to stay a week with us. He'd get here on the same train I did, the only train that was passing through these parts, on noon, October 25th. So for the next few days, we was all so excited I forgot all my crazy notions for a spell. Uncle Fred, he fixed up the back room for Cousin Osborne real nice to sleep in. I helped him with the carpenter parts of the job. Days got shorter right along, and nights was all cold with big winds. It was pretty brisk the morning of the 25th. And Uncle Fred, he was all bundled up to drive through the woods. He meant to fetch Cousin Osborne at noon. It was 7 miles to the station. He wouldn't take me, and I didn't beg. Them woods was too full of creaking and rustling sounds from the wind. And sounds that might be something else, too. Well, Uncle Fred left, and Aunt Lucy and I stayed in the house. She's putting up preserves and our plums for over the winter season. I washed out jars from the well. Seems like I should have told about them having 2 wells, a new one with a big shiny pump close to the house, and an old stone one out by the barn with the pump gone the snakes like to hang out by. Never had been any good, Uncle said. It was here then when they bought the place. The water in that old well was all slimy, something funny about it, because even without a pump, sometimes it seemed to back up. Uncle Fred couldn't figure it out, but some mornings water would be running out over the sides, green, slimy water that smelled terrible. Yeah, we kept away from it, and I was out by the new well until along about noon when it started to cloud up, Aunt Lucy fixed lunch, and it started in to rain hard with the thunder rolling off the big hills in the west. Seemed to me Uncle Fred and Cousin Osborne was going to have troubles getting home in that storm, but Aunt Lucy didn't fret about it none. She just made me help her put up the stock. Come about 5 o'clock, it's getting dark and still no Uncle Fred, and then we begun to worry, right? Maybe the train was late, something happened to the horse or buggy. 6 o'clock, still no Uncle Fred, and then the rain stopped, and you could still hear the thunder sort of growling off in the hills. Wet branches kept dripping down the woods, making a sound like women laughing. Maybe the road was too bad for them to get through. Buggy might bog down the wood in the mud. Perhaps they decided to stay in the depot overnight. 7 o'clock, it was pitch dark outside. No rain sounds anymore. Aunt Lucy was awful worried. She said for us to go out and post a lantern on the fence spread out by the road. We went down to the path and to the fence. It was dark and the wind had died down. Everything was still, like in the deep part of the woods. I felt kind of scared just walking down the path with Aunt Lucy. Like something was out there in that quiet dark, someplace, waiting to grab me. We lit the lantern and we stood there looking down the dark road. And, "What's that?" Aunt Lucy said real sharp-like. I listened and I heard a drumming sound far away. "Horse and buggy," I said. Aunt Lucy perked up. "Why, you're right," she says all at once. And it is, 'cause we see it. The horse is running fast. The buggy lurches behind it, crazy like. It don't even take a second to look and to see something's happened, 'cause the buggy don't stop by the gate but keeps going on up to the barn with Aunt Lucy and me running through the mud after the horse. The horse is all full of lather and foam, and when it stops, it can't stand still. Aunt Lucy and I wait for Uncle Fred and Cousin Osborne to step out, but nothing happens. We look inside, and ain't nobody in the buggy. Nobody at all. Aunt Lucy says, "Oh," in a real loud voice, and then faints away. I had to carry her back to the house and get her into bed. And I'm not very big. And I waited almost all night by the window, but Uncle Fred and Cousin Osborne never showed up. Never. Yeah. The next few days there was awful. There was nothing in the buggy for a clue like to what happened. And Aunt Lucy wouldn't let me go along the road into town, even to the station through the woods. The next morning the horse was dead in the barn, and of course we'd had to walk to the depot or all those miles to Warren's farm. Aunt Lucy was scared to go and scared to stay, and she allowed us how when Cap Pritchett comes by with the mail, we'd best go with him over to town and make a report there and stay there in town until we found out what happened. Now me? Yeah, I had my own ideas what happened. As I said, Halloween was only a few days away now. Maybe them ones had snatched Uncle Fred and Cousin Osborne for sacrifice. Them ones, or the Druids. The mythology book said Druids could even raise storms if they wanted to with their spells. Yeah. There was no sense talking to Aunt Lucy, though. She was like out of her head with worry anyway, just rocking back and forth and mumbling over and over, "They're gone, they're gone. And Fred always warned me. No use, no use, no use." I had to get the meals and tend to stock myself. And I kind of mused that probably even monsters need to eat. Yeah. Nights it was hard to sleep because I kept listening for drums. I never heard any, though, but it was still better than sleeping and having those dreams. Dreams about the black thing like a tree, walking through the woods and sort of rooting itself to one particular spot so it could pray with all those mouths, pray down to that old God on the ground below. I don't know where I got the idea that was how it prayed, by sort of attaching its mouths to the ground. Maybe it was on account of seeing the green slime. Or had I really seen it at all? Well, I'd never gone back to look, tell you that. Maybe it was all in my head. The druid's story about, and the druids, and then about them ones, and the voice that said ℍ𝕆𝕆𝕋𝔼𝔼 with all the reality thing and all the rest. Then again, where was Cousin Osborne and my Uncle Fred? And what scared the horse so it up and died the next day? Yeah. Thoughts kept going round and round in my head, chasing each other. But all I knew was we'd be out of here by Halloween night. Because Halloween was on a Thursday that year, and Cap Pritchett would come and we could ride to town with him. Night before, I made Aunt Lucy pack and we got all ready, and I settled down to sleep. There was no noises, and for the first time I felt a little better. Only the dreams come again. I dreamed a bunch of men come in the night and crawled through the parlor bedroom window where Aunt Lucy slept, and they got her. I dreamed they tied her up and took her away all quiet in the dark because they had cat eyes and they didn't need light to see. The dream scared me, so I woke up while I was just breaking into dawn. I went down the hall to Aunt Lucy right away. She was gone. The window was wide open just like in my dream, and some of the blankets was all torn up. The ground was hard outside the window. I didn't see any footprints or anything, but Aunt Lucy was gone. I guess I cried then. It's hard to remember what I did next. I didn't want no breakfast. I went out hollering, "Aunt Lucy, Aunt Lucy." Not expecting no answer, though. I walked to the barn and the door was open. The cows were gone. I saw one or two prints going out the yard and up the road, but I didn't think it was safe to follow them. Sometime later, I went over to the well, and then I cried again because the water was all slimy green in the new well, just like in the old well. When I saw that, I knew I was right. Them ones must have come in at night, and they wasn't even trying to hide their doings no more. It's like they was sure of things. And tonight, tonight was Halloween. I had to get out of here. If them ones was watching and waiting, I couldn't depend on Cap Pritchett showing up this afternoon with the mail. Well, we didn't get no mail. What if something happened to him? I'd have to chance it down the road, and I'd better start walking now in the morning while it was still light enough to make town. So I rummaged around. I found a little money in Uncle Fred's drawer of the bureau and Cousin Osborne's letter with the address in Kingsport he wrote from. That's where I'd have to go after I told folks in town what happened. I'd have some kin down there somewhere. I wondered if they'd believe me in town when I told them about the way Uncle Fred disappeared and Aunt Lucy, about them stealing the cattle for a sacrifice, about the green slime in the well with something that stopped to drink. I wondered if they would know about the drums and the lights on the hills tonight, and if they was going to get up a party and come back this evening and try and catch them ones, what they meant to call up rumbling out of the earth. I wondered if those townsfolk even knew what a shoggoth was. Well, whether they did or not, I couldn't stay and find out for myself. So I packed up my satchel and I got ready to leave. Most have been around noon and everything was still. I went to the door and I stepped outside, not bothering to lock it behind me, Why should I? Nobody around for miles. That's when I heard the noise down the road. Footsteps. Somebody walking along the road just round a bend. I stood still for a minute, waiting to run. and then he come along. He was tall and thin, looked something like Uncle Fred, only a lot younger without a beard, and he was wearing a nice city kind of suit with a crush hat. He smiled when he saw me and come marching up like he knowed who I was. "Hello, Willie," he said. I didn't say nothing. I was so confused. "Don't you know me? I'm your cousin Osborne." "Your cousin Frank." He held out his hand to shake. But then I guess you wouldn't remember. No, you wouldn't remember me, would you? Last time I saw you, you were only a baby, weren't you? "But I thought you were supposed to come last week," I said. "We expected you on the 25th. "Well, you didn't get my telegram? I had business." I shook my head. No, we never get nothing here unless the mail delivers it on Thursdays. Maybe it's at the station." Cousin Osborne grinned. "You're pretty well off the beaten track at that." "Nobody at the station this noon. I was hoping Fred'd come along with the buggy so I wouldn't have to walk, but no luck." "What, you walked all the way?" I asked him. "That's right." "You come on the train?" Cousin Osborne nodded. "Where's your suitcase?" "Oh, well, I left it at the depot. Too far to walk to fetch it along. I thought Fred'd drive me back there in the buggy to pick it up." He noticed my luggage for the first time. "Hey, but wait a minute. Where are you going with a suitcase, son?" Well, there was nothing else for me to do but to tell him everything that happened. So I said for him to come into the house and sit down, and I'd explain it all. We went back in. He fixed some coffee. I made a couple of sandwiches, and we ate. And then I told him about Uncle Fred going to the depot and not coming back, and about the horse, and then what happened to Aunt Lucy. And I left out the part about me in the woods, of course, and I didn't even hint at them ones. But I told him I was scared, and I figured on walking to town today before dark. Cousin Osborne, he listened to me, nodding, not saying much, interrupting. "Now you can see why we got to go right away," I said. Whatever come after them be coming after us, cousin. I don't want to spend another night here." Cousin Osborne stood up. "Yeah, you may be right, Willie. But don't let your imagination run away with you, son. Try to separate fact from fancy, right? Your aunt and uncle have disappeared, that's a fact. But this other nonsense about things in the woods coming after you, that's just fancy. Reminds me of all the silly talk I heard back home in Arkham, and for some reason there seems to be more around this time of year, at Halloween, Why, when I left... Excuse me, Cousin Osborne, but don't you live in Kingsport?" "Why, to be sure. But I did live in Arkham once, and I know the people around here. No wonder you're so frightened in the woods and got to imagine things. As it is, I admire your bravery. For a 12-year-old, you've acted very sensibly." "Well, then let's start walking. Here it is almost 2, and we better get moving if we want to make town before sundown." No. Not just yet, son," Cousin Osborne said. "I wouldn't feel right about leaving without looking around and seeing what we can discover about this mystery. After all, you must understand we can't just march into town and tell the sheriff some wild nonsense about strange creatures in the woods making off with your aunt and uncle. Yeah, sensible folks just won't believe such things. They might think I was lying and laugh at me. They might even think you had something to do with your aunt and uncle's, leaving." "Please, cousin, we gotta go right now," I pleaded. But he just shook his head. I didn't say any more. I might have told him a lot about what I dreamed and heard and saw and knew, but I figured it was no use. Besides, there's some things I didn't want to say to him now that I had talked to him. I was feeling scared again. Somehow a dark thought came in my head to just set him on fire, but that just ain't the way I was raised, so I just dismissed that. First he said he was from Arkham, and then when I asked him, he said he was from Kingsport, but it sounded like a lie to me. I don't know, maybe I should get me some matches. Then he said something about me being scared in the woods, and how could he know that I was scared out in the woods? I never told him that part at all. Yeah, something's not right about Cousin Osborne. If you want to know what I really thought, I thought maybe he wasn't really Cousin Osborne at all. And if he wasn't Cousin Osborne, then who was he? I stood up and I walked back into the hall. "Where you going, son?" "Outside." "I'll come with you." Sure enough, he was watching me. He wasn't going to let me out of his sight. He came over and took my arm, real friendly like, but I couldn't break loose. No, he hung on to me. He knew I meant to run for it. What could I do? What could I do all alone in the house in the woods with this man? The night coming on, Halloween night, and them ones out there was waiting. And we went outside. I noticed it was getting darker already, even in the afternoon. Clouds had covered up the sun, and the wind was moving the trees, so they stretched out of their branches like they was trying to hold me back. They made a rustling sound, just as if they were whispering things about me, and he sort of looked up at them and listened. Yeah, maybe he understood what they were saying. Maybe they were giving him orders. And I almost laughed, because he was listening to something, and now I heard it too. It was a drumming sound on the road. "It's Cap Pritchett," I said. "He's a mailman. Now we can ride to town with him in the buggy." "You let me talk to him," he says, "about your aunt and uncle. No sense in alarming him, you know. We don't want any scandals, do we? You just run along inside." "But Cousin Osborne, we got to tell the truth." "Of course, son, of course. It's a matter for adults. Now run along. I'll call you." Well, he was real polite about it. He even smiled. But all the same, he dragged me back up the porch and into the house and slammed the door. I stood there in the dark hall, and I could hear Cap Pritchett slow down and call out to him, and him going up to the buggy and talking, and then all I heard was a lot of mumbling real low. I peeked out through a crack in the door, and I saw them. Cap Pritchett was talking to him friendly, all right, and nothing was wrong. Except in that minute or so, Cap Pritchett waved, and then he grabbed the reins, and the buggy started off again. And I knew I'd have to do it, no matter what happened. I opened the door, I ran out, suitcase and all, down the path and up the road after the buggy. Cousin Osborne, he tried to grab me when I went by, but I ducked around and yelled, "Wait for me, Cap! I'm coming! Take me to town with you! Wait!" Cap slowed down and stared back, real puzzled. "Willie?" he says. "Well, I thought you was gone. You said he said you went away with Fred and Lucy." "You pay no attention. He didn't want me to go. You take me to town, Cap. I'll tell you what really happened. Please, Cap, you got to take me with you." "Sure, I'll take you, Willie. Hop right up here." So I hopped right up there. Cousin Osborne, he come right up the buggy. "Here now," he said real sharp. "You can't leave like this. I forbid it. You're in my custody." "You don't listen to him. Don't listen to him. Take me, Cap, please." "Very well," said Cousin Osborne. "If you insist on being unreasonable, we'll all go. I cannot permit you to leave alone." He smiled at Cap. "You can see the boy's unstrung here. I trust you'll not be disturbed by his imaginings living out here like this. Well, you understand. He's not quite himself. I'll explain everything on the way to town." He sort of shrugged at Cap and made signs of tapping his head. Then he smiled again and made to climb up next to us in the buggy seat. But the Caps didn't smile back. "Oh, no, you don't. This boy Willie is a good boy. I know him. And I don't know you. Looks as if you'd done enough explaining already, mister, when you said Willie had gone away." "But I merely wanted to avoid talk. You see, I've been called in to doctor the boy. He's mentally unstable." "Stable to be damned." Cap spit out some tobacco juice right at Cousin Osborne's feet. "We're going." Cousin Osborne stopped smiling. "Then I insist you take me with you," he said. He tried to climb up in the buggy. Cap reached into his jacket. He pulled out his hand out again. He had a big pistol in it. "You get down," he yelled. "Mister, you're talking United States mail. You don't tell the government nothing, you understand me? Now you get down before I mess your brains all over this road." Cousin Osborne scowled, but he got away from the buggy fast. He looked at me and shrugged. "You're making a big mistake, Willie," he said. I didn't even look at him. Cap said, "Yep." We went off down the road. The buggy wheels turned faster and faster, and pretty soon the farmhouse was out of sight, and Cap put his pistol away and patted me on the shoulder. "You stop that trembling now, Willie. You're safe now. Nothing to worry about. I'll be in town in a little over an hour or so. Now you just sit back and tell old Cap all about it." So I told him. It took a long time. We kept going through the woods, and before I knew it was almost dark. Sun streaked down. He hid behind the hills. The dark began to creep out of the woods on each side of the road, and all the trees started to rustle, whispering to the big shadows that followed us. The horse was clipping and clopping along like, and pretty soon there were other noises from far away. Might have been thunder, might have been something else. It was getting nighttime for sure, and this was a night of Halloween. The road cut off through the hills now. You could hardly see where the next turn would take you. Besides, it's getting dark awful fast. "I guess we're in for a spell of rain, eh?" Cop said, looking up. "What's thunder, I reckon?" "Or drums," I said. "Drums?" "At night you hear, in the hills you can hear 'em," I told him. "I heard 'em all at once. It's them ones getting ready for the Sabbath." "Sabbath?" Cap looked at me. "Where you hear tell about a Sabbath?" Then I told him more about what had happened. I told him all the rest. He didn't say anything before long. He couldn't have answered me anyway, because the thunder was all around us and the rain was lashing down the buggy, on the road everywhere. It's pitch black outside now, and the only time we could see was when the lightning flashed. I had to yell to make him hear me. Yell about the things that caught Uncle Fred, and the things that come for Aunt Lucy, the things that took our cattle and then sent Cousin Osborne back to fetch me. I hollered out about what I'd heard in the wood, too. In the lightning flashes, I could see the Cap's face. He wasn't smiling or scowling. He just looked like he believed me. And I noticed he had his pistol out again. He was holding the reins with one hand, even though he was racing along. The horse was so scared he didn't need the whip to keep him running. The old buggy was lurching and bouncing. The rain was whistling down. The wind was all like an awful dream, but it was real. It was real when I hollered out to Cap Pritchard about that time in the woods. "Shoggoth!" I yelled. "What's a shoggoth?" Yeah. Cap grabbed my arm, and then lightning coming, I could see his face with his mouth open, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the road and what was ahead of us. So the trees sort of come together, hanging over the next turn, and in the black, it looked as if they were alive, moving and bending and twisting to block our way. Lightning flickered up again. I could see them plain, and also something else I could see, something black in the road, something that wasn't a tree, something big and black, just squatting there, waiting with its ropey arms, squirming and reaching. "Shoggoth! Shoggoth!" Cap yelled. But I could scarcely hear him because the thunder was roaring. Now the horse let out a scream, and I felt the buggy jerk to one side, and the horse reared up. He was almost into the black stuff. I could smell an awful smell, and Cap was pointing his pistol. It went off with a bang that was almost as loud as the thunder, and almost as loud as the sound we'd made when we hit the black thing. Then everything happened at once: the thunder, the horse falling, the shot, and us hitting the buggy. As the buggy went over, Cap must have had the reins wrapped around his arm, because when the horse fell and the buggy turned, he went right over the dashboard head first, down into the squirming mess that was the horse and the black thing that grabbed it. I felt myself falling in the dark, and I landed in the mud and the gravel of the road. There was thunder and screaming, another sound which I'd heard only once before in those woods, a droning sound like a voice. That's why I never looked back. That's why I didn't even think about being hurt when I landed. I just got up and started to run down the road as fast as I could, run down the road in the storm and in the dark with the trees squirming and twisting and shaking their heads while they pointed at me with their branches and laughed. Over the thunder, I heard the horse screaming. I heard Cap scream too, but I still didn't look back. The lightning winked on and off. I ran through the trees now because the wood was nothing but mud that dragged me down and sucked at my legs. After a while, I began to scream too, but I couldn't even hear myself in the thunder. And more than thunder, I say. I heard drums. All at once, I busted clear of the woods. I got to the hills. I ran up, and the drumming got louder, and pretty soon I could see regular, not just when there was lightning, because there was fires burning on the hills, and the booming of the drums come from there. I got lost in all that noise, the wind shrieking, the trees laughing, the drums pounding, but I stopped in time. I stopped when I saw the fires plain, red and green fires burning in all that rain. I saw a big white stone in the center of a cleared-off space on top of the hill. The red and the green fires was around it and behind it, so everything stood out clear against the flames. There was men around the altar, men with long gray beards and wrinkled-up faces, men throwing awful-smelling stuff on the fires to make them blaze red and green. They had knives in their hands, and I could hear them howling over the storm. And back squatting on the ground, more men pounded on drums, and pretty soon something else was coming up the hill. 2 men driving cattle there was, and I could tell it was our cows they drove. They drove them right up the altar, and then the men with the knives cut their throats for a sacrifice. All this I could see in the lightning flashes and in the firelights, and I sort of scrooched down so I wouldn't get spotted by no one. Pretty soon I couldn't see very good no more on account of the way they threw stuff on the fire. They set up a real thick black smoke, like the hippies do. When the smoke come up, the men began to chant and pray louder. I couldn't hear words, but the sounds was like what I heard back in the woods. I couldn't see too good, but I knew what was going to happen. Two men who led the cattle away went back down to the other side of the hill. When they come up again, they had new sacrifices. The smoke kept me from seeing plain, but these was two-legged sacrifices, not four-legged. I might have seen better at that. Only now I hid my face when they dragged them up to the white altar, and they used the knives and the fire, and the smoke flared up, and the drums boomed, and they all chanted and called in a loud voice. And called out in a loud voice to something waiting over on the other side of the hill. And then the ground began to shake. It was storming, and there was thunder and lightning and fire and smoke and chanting, and I was scared about half out of my wits. But one thing I'll swear to, the ground began to be shaken. It shook and it shivered, and they called out to something. In a minute, something came. Oh, it came crawling up the hillside to the altar and the sacrifice, and it was the black thing of my dreams. It was that black, ropey, slimy, jelly tree thing out of the woods. It crawled up and it flowed up on its hooves and its mouths and snaky arms. And the men bowed and stood back. And when it got to the altar, there was something squirming on top, squirming and screaming. The black thing sort of bent over the altar, and then I heard the droning sounds or the screaming as it come down. Well, I only watched a minute, but what I watched, the black thing began to swell and grow. Oh, that finished me up. I didn't care no more. I had to run. I got up and I run and I run and I run, and the screaming at the top of my lungs, no matter who heard me. I kept a running. I kept a screaming forever through the woods and the storm, away from that hill and that altar, and then all at once I knew where I was, and yeah, I was back here at the farmhouse. Yeah, that's what I'd done, all right. I'd run in a circle and I'd come back. But I couldn't go any further. I couldn't stand the night and the storm, so I run inside here. At first, after I locked the door, I just lay right down on the floor, all tuckered out from running and crying. In a little while, I got up and I hunted me some nails and a hammer and some of Uncle Fred's boards that wasn't split up into kindling. I nailed up the door first, and I boarded up all the windows, every last one of them. Guess I worked for hours, tired as I was. When it was all done, the storm died down and it got quiet. Quiet enough for me to lie down on the couch and go to sleep. Yeah. Here I am. I woke up a couple hours ago. It was daylight. I could see it shining through the cracks. From the way the sun come in, I knew it was afternoon already. I slept through the whole morning, nothing had come. I figured now maybe I could let myself out and make town on foot like I planned yesterday. Yeah, but I figured wrong. Before I got started taking out the nails, I heard him. It was Cousin Osborne, of course. Well, the man who said he was Cousin Osborne, I mean. He come into the yard calling, "Willie, Willie!" But I didn't answer him. Then he tried the door and the windows, and I could hear him pounding and cussing. That was bad. And he began mumbling. That was worse, because the man he wasn't out there alone. I sneaked a look through the crack, but he already went around to the back of the house. I didn't see him or who was with him. Guess that's just as well, because if I'm right, I wouldn't want to see. Hearing's bad enough. Hearing that deep croaking, then him talking on, and that croaking again. Smelling that awful smell like the green slime from the woods around the well. The well, yeah. They went over to the well in the dark, and I heard Cousin Osborne say something about, "Wait until dark. We can use the well if you find the gate. You gotta look for the gate." Yeah, I know what that means now. The well must be some sort of entrance to the underground place. That's where those druid men live. Them and the black thing. Yeah, they're out back now. They're out back now looking. I've been writing for quite a spell, and already the afternoon's going. Peeking through the cracks, I can see it's getting dark again. That's what I'm going to come for. That's when they'll come for me. When it's dark. They'll break down the doors or the windows and come and take me. They'll take me down into that well, into the black places where the Shoggoths are. Yeah, it must be a whole world down there under the hills. A world where they hide and wait to come out for more sacrifices, more blood. They don't want any humans around except for sacrifices. I saw what that black thing did on the altar. Yeah, I saw. I know what's going to happen to me. I know. Maybe they'll miss the real cousin Osborne back home and send somebody to find out what would come of him. Maybe folks in town will miss ℍ𝕆𝕌𝕍 and go on a search. Yeah, maybe they'll come here and find me. If they don't come soon, I mean like now, it's going to be too late. I guess that's why I wrote this. It's true across my heart, every word of it. If anyone finds this notebook where I hide it, well, you come and look down the well, the old well out and back. Remember what I told you about them ones? Watch out for the snakes, too. Block up the well, clean out the swamps. Yeah. If you're reading this, there ain't no sense looking for me if I'm not here. Dang, I wish I wasn't so scared. I'm not even scared so much for myself now, but for other folks. The ones who might come after and live around here and have the same thing happen. Same thing or worse. You just got to believe me. Go to the woods if you don't. Go to the hill. The hill where they had their sacrifice. And I knew I should have burned up Cousin Osborne when I had the chance. Maybe the stains are gone out there and the rain washed the footprints away. Maybe they got rid of the traces of the fire. But the altar stone must be there. If it is, you'll know the truth. There should be some big round spots on that stone. Round spots about 2 feet wide. I didn't tell about that, did I? At the last, I did look back. I looked back at the big black thing that was a Shoggoth. I looked back as it kept swelling and growing. I guess I told about how it could change shape and how big it got, didn't I? But you can't hardly imagine how big or what shape it. I still doesn't tell. All I say is look. Look, and you'll see what's hiding under the earth in these hills, waiting to creep out and feast and kill some more. Wait. They're coming now. Getting twilight, I can hear the footsteps and other sounds, voices and other sounds. They're banging on my door. Sure enough, they must have a tree or a plank for battering it down. The whole place is shaking. I can hear Cousin Osborne yelling and droning on. The smell is awful. I'm getting sick. And in a minute, I'm telling you, you reading this, you look at the altar when you'll understand what I'm trying to tell. Look at the big round marks, 2 feet wide on each side. That's where the big black thing grabbed hold of that giant stone. You look for the marks, you'll know what I saw. What I'm afraid of. What's waiting to grab you unless you shut it up forever under the earth. Black marks 2 feet wide. But they aren't just marks. What they really are is fingerprints. You hear the doors busting open. And so, Notebook Found in a Deserted House by Robert Bloch. Happy Halloween.